Translation of Ruth chapter 1. And it happened in days of, you see here the plural construct, and it happened in days of judging the judges. So what we have here is a long construct relationship. So in proper English, we would translate it, and it happened in the days of the judging of the judges. And it was a famine in, article, the land. And it went out a man from the house of Lechem, or from Bethlehem, of Yehuda, to sojourn in fields of, again here, the plural construct, in fields of Moab. So we have a little construct relationship here, since the last element, the absolute state word, Moab, is a definite word. The whole thing becomes definitiveness. It's a proper name, therefore it has definitiveness. Therefore we translate, and it went out a man from the house of Lechem, bread, of Jehudah, to sojourn in the fields of Moab. He and the wife of him, and two of the sons of him. In proper English, and it was in the days of the judging of the judges, and it happened a famine in the land, and it went out a man from the house of Lechem, or from Bethlehem, of Yehudah, to sojourn in the fields of Moab, he and his wife, and two of his sons. And name of the man, construct relationship again, so, and the name of the man, Elimelech, was Elimelech. So here, this is a nominal clause. So the name of the man is your subject, while is your predicate complement. And the name of the wife of him, Naomi. And the name of the two sons of him, Machlon and Kilion. Ephratites from Bethlehem of Yehudah. And they entered the fields of Moab, and they were there. Verse 3. And it died Elimelech, man of Naomi, and it remained she and two of the daughters of the sons of her. What you see in this first clause, and it died Elimelech, the son of Naomi, we have here an apposition. Elimelech, the husband of Naomi. And it raised for them women they, or in proper English, and they raised for them women. This is an idiom and would mean they choose women for them, or they married women. So they raised from a crowd of women, so to say, they picked each man his wife or his woman. And they raised for them women, Moabite ones. The name of the one, Orpah, and the name of the second one, Ruth. And they sat there about 10 years. You see here again some nominal clauses. We have the name of the one, Orpah. So in English we would add a word to be. The name of the one was Orpah, and then the name of the second one was Ruth. And it died they also, two of them, Machlon and Kilion. So, and also they two, the two died. Also the two, it died also the two of them, Machlon and Kilion. And it remained the woman from the two of the boys of her, and from the husband of her. Now this is a unknown construction, or somewhat awkward construction in English if we were to translate this more literal, and the problem is the preposition min here, min twice. You might have to remember that the preposition min can trigger two basic meanings. And it depends on the valence of the verb, which of the two meanings is being triggered. If it's a verb of movement that is being involved, then, for example, walk, take something from something, give something to somebody, run from something, walk from something, and so on, a verb of movement, then min triggers the function from. So from a location, from. If it's not a verb of movement, well, then it has comparative function and means something like in comparison to. So in this case, we have min. So always ask yourself, is the verb that is governing the prepositional phrase, in this case, sha'ar in nifal, is this a verb of movement? Which is not, to remain. To remain is not a word of movement. So you can then use the comparative function in comparison to. So, and the woman remained compared to the two of her boys and compared to her husband. So in contrast, so to say, again, comparison is important. In a proper English translation could use the word in contrast in this case. In contrast to the two of her boys and her husband, she remained. Verse 6, and it rose she and daughters-in-law of her, and she turned from the fields of Moab. Yeah, as it has heard she in the fields of Moab that it is visiting Yahweh, or that Yahweh takes care. Fakat can mean to take care, to visit. That Yahweh takes care of the people of him, to give to them bread. You see here the literary artistry, namely Bethlehem, the house of bread, does not seem to have bread. Therefore, God is going to take care of his people by giving them lechem, by giving them bread. What you see here in this clause is that we have in the first clause we have a singular predicate, but a plural subject. He v'chaltoheha. So this is a typical phenomenon that we find in Hebrew. Other languages have that too. English does not have it, namely that there's a mismatch between the singular predicate and the plural subject. It's typical in Hebrew, and it has to do something with the word order. So in English, we will have first our subject, then our predicate, and then our direct object or object. In Hebrew, it's the other way around. So we first have the predicate, then we have the subject, then we have the direct object. So these two positions are being swapped in Hebrew. The predicate precedes the subject. Now, since the predicate precedes the subject, it is unclear, at least in the process of how the language presents itself, how the words come to the listener or to the reader, it's unclear what the number of the subject is yet. Therefore, we find it regularly that the predicate, even if the later subject is plural, we find it often that the predicate appears in a singular and thus mismatches the plural. In English, that is hardly happening. Why? Because from the get-on, from the very beginning, it's clear who the subject is, whether it's singular or plural. If it's plural, we can directly also add the plural predicate. So this is a phenomenon you can get acquainted with as it appears more often. And it rose, the woman and her daughters-in-law, and she returned from the fields of Moab. You see now again that the word min is appearing. However, this time very clearly because it has shuv as a predicate, as a verb of movement, we trigger the meaning from. And she returned from the fields of Moab. For, as you know, I like to use the word because it always works. For she heard in the fields of Moab that. We have two keys here. You see that the second key opens a dependent clause And this dependent clause relates to our independent clause, ki shema bisde moaf, relates to that by delivering its direct object. So what did she hear? She heard that it was taking care, Yahweh, of his people to give for them bread. So this whole thing is the object of her hearing. So ki informs the reader or listener that Shema has its own object. However, it's not an object phrase, it's an entire clause. What does she hear? She hears that the Lord has taken care of his people, or is taking care of his people to give them bread. So in this green box, we have two dependent clauses, latet lahem lachem, to give for them bread, and ki fakat Adonai et amo, which is also a dependent clause. However, this dependent clause depends on the previous dependent clause, while this previous dependent clause depends on this independent clause. Verse 7. It went out from the fields of, from the place, and it went out from the place. You see here again min being used with the word of movement, therefore it means from. And it went out from the place, and she went out from the place which she was there, locative A, therewards, literally, where she was towards. We'll have to discuss this in a second more. And two of the daughters of her, actually the daughters-in-law of her, with her, and they went on the article, on the way, to return to the land of Yehuda. Why the land? The land because we have a construct relationship with Yehuda, and Yehuda is having definitiveness because of it being a proper name. So it went out, she went out from the place, of which is to say she was there. You see that the asher clause opens a dependent clause dependent on this independent clause. The one that I'm marking here in green is the independent clause. Asher is the dependent clause. And awkwardly enough, it's awkward in Hebrew too, the word haya, here the word haya has as complement an indirect object with the locative he towards there or therewards, if you want to mimic the Hebrew, therewards. Exegetically, this is an interesting thing, namely the text indicates that she was not there. Usually you would have haya with sham. She was there, or he was there, but she was therewards, which indicates that she is really not at a place where she has arrived. She's still on the go. She is therewards. This awkward formulation emphasizes the unsettledness of Naomi. Verse 8. And it said she, Naomi, and Naomi said, and it said Naomi to the two of the daughters-in-law of her. You see now an imperative coming. Go, return, each woman to the house of her mother. It shall do Yahweh with you loving kindness as you did with the dying ones and with me. Couple of things that should be mentioned here. As you see, we have the word isha being used in a distributive sense. That's how it's being usually referred to in linguistics. So we have words in any language that can function distributively. Think about the English word each, or one. So one can do this, or each of us can go blah 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 blah. And so words like each and one in English have can be used distributively. And in Hebrew, that would be the word ish or isha. So you always need to check the context, whether it's being used distributively. There are also grammatical arguments for that, why this is being used distributively, because if you look at the predicates, they are all plural, na, but then isha is singular. That's a clear indication that we have here distributive use of ish, isha. So when we have a distributive use, we will say each woman, each woman to the house of her mother. Another observation that you can do here, ya'ase, this is a Ketiv Kere question. If you look it up in your Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia, you will see that this is receiving Sigla with a Ketiv Kere annotation of the Masoretes. When the Masoretes received in their source text the 4 consonants that they were then to punctuate, to vowelize, they should have, as you know your Lamed Hey verbs or third position Hey verbs, they should have done something like this, ya'ase. So this would have been the proper third singular masculine yictoil imperfect vowelization for us. However, the Masoretes decided to not provide the to be expected vowelization, vowels, for these 4 consonants, but they did instead choose for 2 patachs, which makes then basically this form be read as ya'as. Now, ya'as is a different tense to ya'ase. It's still asa in a third singular masculine form, but now it becomes Yusuf. You see, we have the apocopation of the Hey take place, so therefore Ya'ase, when turning into Ya'as, becomes Yusuf. So then the Masoretes would suggest the reading, it must do, it shall do, it must do Adonai with you loving kindness as you did with the dead dying ones and with me. And as a final comment, we have a look here at asitem. It's plural, but it is weirdly enough not a feminine, even though it refers to 2 ladies, Orpah and Ruth, in masculine morphology, tem. We would have expected 10. This is a feature that we find more often in the book of Ruth, that we refer to female actors, to female subjects, by the default masculine verbal endings. Verse 9. And it gives Yahweh, it's a yiten, it's not a vaiten, and Yahweh gives to you, so the speech of Naomi continues, and Yahweh gives to you, and you find, na, orthographic variation, think about na, can be also written as na, so, and you find a resting place. Again, each woman, you see each woman, distributive use of the word ish, each woman a house of her husband, and it kissed she towards them, and they lifted their voice, and they cried. So we see that the direct speech ends here. Why do we know that? Because now the speaker is no longer first person, but third person again, and she kissed them. We see that the ladies, Ruth and Orpah, are no longer second person. You see here second person, you did, but they are now third person to them. Clear indication that we have stepped out of the direct speech and we are back in the narration. She kissed them, and they raised their voice, kolan, their voice, kol, kolan, and they were crying. Verse 10. And they said to her, with you we return to the people of yours. You see here clearly the shifting of person, number, gender references due to the beginning of the speech. So they speak to her. There we are on the narrative level, and they spoke to her. But then she becomes you. With you, we return to your people. You see here the difference of person third versus second. Verse 11. And it said Naomi, you see we have again imperatives following, and it said Naomi, turn, my daughters. A new clause starts here, interrogative. Interrogatives always start a new clause. Why you walk with me? Again, interrogative. Yet, and with a ha interrogative, we don't translate the ha, we just raise our voice at the end of the clause, by which we trigger the interrogation. So, yet to me sons in the belly of me. Yeah, so that's the question. And they are for you as man. We would add here again our interrogative. And they are going to be for you as man. You see again that the pronominal suffix is a second masculine plural. We would have expected a feminine, but as I told you earlier, this is a feature of Ruth that we sometimes refer to women by using masculine references. Verse 12, the imperatives continue. Na, turn, my daughters. Lechna, from halach, lechna, turn. Yeah, old I am from being for a man. Again, important, we have the min preposition here. Do we have a verb of movement involved, zaken? No, we don't. Therefore, min will have to be translated in comparative sense, comparison. Yeah. So this would mean, turn now, my daughters, go, for, I am too old of being for a husband or for a man. Yeah, I say, there is for me hope. Even I am the knight for a man, and even I give birth to sons. You see, she's building up a causal statement. Even if, even, and then we turn to verse 13. We have to add this in order to complete the thought here. Is it not for them, that is the boys, that you wait until, of which is to say, they become big, they become adults, so to say? Is it not that there is, I need to check this. Okay, we do verse 13 again. Halahen, that is therefore, again, the interrogative, we don't need to translate, we just raise our voice at the end. Lahen is therefore. Therefore, you wait until, of which is to say, they become big. So now we raise the voice. Therefore, you're waiting until they become big? And next interrogation. Therefore, you're closing yourself up for not being for a man. Yeah, so the idea is they should not wait until they have grown up, and they should not close themselves up from potential other relationships with another husband, because it would take a lot of time until her boys, if she were to have boys, adult. No. You see here now the conclusion. No, my daughters. Yeah, bitter has been to me very much this, compared to you. Yeah, it went out against me, the hand of Yahweh. So we have a strong statement being done here by Naomi, two statements actually. You see here again the preposition min being used, so always check. Is min being preceded by a verb of movement? No, to be bitter is not a word of movement. Therefore, we translate min in the comparative sense. Therefore, yeah, bitter or more bitter is it to me very much if compared to you. So my life is more bitter than your life. Very, very much more bitter than your life. Mot, very much more bitter than yours. Yes, yeah, or for it went out against me the hand of Adonai. You see the word hand, it's a bodily body part. Body parts are feminine in Hebrew, therefore we have here the feminine predicate. Verse 14. And it raised and they raised the voice of them, and they cried. They cried still. They still cried. And it kissed Orpah towards the mother-in-law of hers. You see that in Hebrew the word kissing, nashak, we had it earlier already, is a word of movement, therefore we have a preposition. In English, it would not be a word of movement, we would have a direct object, I kiss you. But in Hebrew, kissing is a word of movement and therefore requires a prepositional phrase with l, to kiss towards somebody. I think we had this earlier already, that they are kissing towards each other. Yeah, here we have it in verse 9. And she kissed towards them. So here again, she kisses, that is Orpah now, and Orpah kisses towards her mother-in-law, or she kisses her mother-in-law. And Ruth clinged to her. So while the one kisses, Orpah kisses, Naomi, Ruth, in contrast, clings to her, does not let her go. And it said she, behold, turn. Again, we need to just watch this, verse 15. Yeah, okay, verse 15 again. And she said, look, it returned your sister-in-law of yours, your sister-in-law, to the people of her, and to the gods of her. Turn behind her. You see here our imperative. Turn behind